Hi everyone, Mark from AudioPursuit. And yes, it's been a few months, but it's been a pretty interesting summer. My wife and I spent a few weeks in Italy, followed up by me helping my son get his house ready to sell, and then forest fires hit. And we had a very large one just a few miles from us, and we were evacuated for 8 days. But in between those time periods, I managed to purchase and have the opportunity to listen to one of the hottest bookshelf speakers on the market today, and that is the Kef R3 Meta. Now I want to emphasize that these were bought off of eBay, I believe from what they call a pallet return setup, where all sorts of returns are sent and then they just sell it as a big pallet, kind of like a mystery thing. Well, the box on these was severely damaged. However, I took a chance, and sure enough, the cabinets are basically pristine. Just one little nick in a bottom corner where that black paint came off. I mean, a couple of months ago, I reviewed the Q150s, and I really liked them. But there was something missing in it. There was that gravitas that I wanted to hear. Plus, as I said in the video, they can get a little bright at times and a little bit fatiguing after a while. Well, I thought, you know, I'm going to move up the chain. So I was looking and looking and looking, and I decided, you know what? I'm just going to buy the R3 Metas and get that experience. And what an experience it is. As you probably can see, Kef has their famous UniQ driver where the tweeter is inset in the center, and it uses the mid-driver cone as a waveguide, so it spreads out evenly. This is really huge, and it allows for that wide dispersion. Then they have the separate bass driver. On the back, they have a unique approach to the bi-amp, bi-wire capability. Normally, you get jumpers between the two sets of binding posts. But Kef did something a little different here that's really kind of cool. They put in these two knobs, and they're kind of like connection, deconnection. So you just turn them, and then you can do the bi-amp, bi-wire, or you turn them the other way, they disconnect, and then you plug in your speaker wire into the bottom. The rear port has a very nice rounded flare, and that really eliminates a lot of the chuffing you hear from mini speakers. And that is something that I mentioned in the Q150s, and even more so with the R3 Metas. Now, as you're probably aware, where the Meta makes the difference is on the back, whereby they have this imprint stamp that basically dissipates in the metal by different size shapes and channels the frequencies running to the back of the cabinet. And that is a big improvement. And in talking with friends who have heard both series, and I did not hear the original R3s, they say the difference is tremendous. So I'll go by them. And I think if you look at other reviewers, they will tell you the same thing if they had that experience. The interesting thing about setting up the R3 Metas is that normally I start off with the speakers out about 3 feet from the front wall. Well, what I found was the Metas, even though they image great, boy, the bass support just wasn't there. The bass just disappeared off these things. And for a bookshelf as big as they are, that was really surprising to me. So I started scooting them back and scooting them back some more. And this went on for days. And interestingly enough, I settled with these just 17 inches out from that front wall. To me, that's unheard of. I was blown away by that. And it turns out later on, when I was looking at the measurements from people, especially Erin's Audio Corner, where he uses the Clipple machine, he detailed, in fact, there was a strong reasoning for this. And then I found out from others the same thing. Everybody wanted these speakers closer to that front wall. Now, how does it affect the soundstage? Well, I finally heard at about 15 inches, the soundstage starting to break down, starting to shrink. So that's why I put them back out at 17 inches and found my sweet spot for this room. In my small listening room, the speakers are only about 6 feet apart. And I started off with them towed in normally, just so that each one hits my ears. Well, one of the things I was frustrated about was it just sounded like they were just a bit too bright. And I became a bit frustrated by that. I was moving around some of my extra acoustic panels, and still couldn't quite nail it. Just was a bit frustrating. Well, then I got out my book, Get Better Sound by Jim Smith, started reading through it, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to tow them in right at my ears. I'm going to move them out. And in doing so, that seemed to drop that brightness, and it pretty much disappeared. Each speaker is now firing about this far apart from my ears. And it hasn't reduced the imaging or the sound quality. Instead, it's just gotten rid of that top end brightness. Interestingly enough, once again, watching Erin and his YouTube review with the Clipple machine, he suggested them being turned away about between 10 to, I think, 30 degrees, he said. And he was right on. So, Erin, thank you for doing your measurements and so forth. That really does make a difference. Kef does not have that typical British sound. It's more dynamic, more lively, and it's more North American is the best way I can describe it. That being said, it is not super bright on the top end like some people assume. It does, raise up the volume a little bit, but it's not like Totem or Paradigm. Is more intense, I would say, more front to back. It moves out into the room. But at the same time, it is not aggressive in the way North American speakers are. So keep that in mind. The R3 Metas just have something about it that I would describe as the ability to pull out so much detail. They are truly impressive in the amount of additional detail that they bring to the listener versus other speakers. When you're listening to the Doobie Brothers, for instance, just take a listen to any of their songs from Minute by Minute album. It's just impressive the way you get the layering of the instruments and that separation still that exists. Another one is Alan Parsons. He actually did a little album called The Sicilian Defense. And in that album, which was done just to satisfy a contractual thing, it was created in just a few days, they have a couple of songs in there that are just insane for their dynamics and where the instruments are placed and so forth. And of course, with Alan Parsons running the engineering, you hear it. So find music that comes from the 1970s and 80s before the deep crunch comes on of the loudness wars, and these speakers just are phenomenal in that regard. Let's start off by talking about the bass response. I actually at times engage my little Totem Dreamcatcher subwoofer to bring out more low frequencies. Kef has decided that they are going to focus on that mid-range, the upper mids, and the higher frequencies. And say, hey, you know what? If you really want to hear deep bass, go get a subwoofer. And when I did engage the subwoofer, yes, I did get more. But there's something I want to emphasize in all that, is that you don't need it in a small space like mine, but it's nice to have. And there are certain times when I missed having that next octave down of music not being produced, especially when you consider these run about $2,300 for the pair. But at the same time, what bass they do give you is clean. It's true. It's honest. There is details in there. There's micro details in what you do here. And that's what you want. So I would rather sacrifice the deep boom to get the details in what bass I do get. Take a listen to somebody playing a string bass on this, an upright string bass. And that is where you're going to hear the details that I talk about, those microdynamics that you receive. And while these are not a paper cone, they do present so many of the qualities that a paper cone has such an advantage. If you're one of these people who just sit there and say, hey, you know what, unless it's paper cone, I'm not going to listen. You know, do yourself a favor. Give these an audition anyway. See what you think. You might just be surprised. The mid-range with the R3 Metas is really interesting in that if you look at the measurement tests on the clip and such from Erin's Audio Corner or Audio Science Review, you notice there is a slight dip right around 1 kilohertz. Just a slight dip. And for whatever reason, I found that slight dip maybe lessened the richness of the male vocals a little bit. Female vocals. When you get into good female harmonies, the Indigo girls, or if you listen to Karen Carpenter or Alanis Morissette, just, singers like that, you hear something in there. There's, they catch the differences dropping from soprano into maybe the alto, just there's a little extra richness. Kind of like the thunder that's going on right now that I'm hearing outside. But there's just some pleasantness there. Joni Mitchell. Joni Mitchell's voice in this is really, really cool with the R3 Metas. She has those moments where she hits those little peaks. And, for being recordings, or in some cases near 50 years old, it's just amazing listening to her. So these speakers offer so much. And then you get up into the upper mids, and when you hear a hi-hat or a cymbal, instruments like that, the flute and so forth, you hear the smoothness of that concentric driver and how evenly it spreads throughout the room. And it really does make a difference. Whether you're in this room here at 10 by 11, or when I actually moved them out to my living room, which is a much wider space, it still had that same quality. And finally, the highs. Like I said, they're later on, when I saw some measurements on the Klippel, it did show a rise. And that's why these are towed out a bit. And that's where, watching reviews by Erin's Audio Corner or by AMR with a mirror, you kind of learn these things. And sure enough, I had picked up on that. And later on, when I watched the video by Erin, it confirmed it. Once again, with all of us reviewers out there, don't listen to just one of us or read just one of us or watch just one of us. Look at several. Because a lot of gear is being reviewed nowadays, and that's to everyone's benefit. Caveats about the R3 Metas. And this is kind of important. One, these will never sound like a Harbeth. They don't have that chesty vocal and mid-range with acoustic guitars and mid-string instruments or the piano. You just aren't going to get that. No matter what you try and do, it's just not there. And I will tell you, that's something that it's one of my addictions. So that was something that I missed with these. But at the same time, there is so much other detail going on that I'm hearing. you decide one for the other. And Kef has decided they're going to go for the other details and kind of step back from that richer tonal sound. So that's going to be a personal choice. So this is why you hear some people talking about the boot cart S400 Mark IIs, which I would love to review at some point. This is where the Kefs don't have that, but they have other things, such as they're much more dynamic. I used to own the Harbeth Compact 7 and love those speakers for that, for that tonal richness and so forth. Oh, I mean, they're incredible, but they're not the most dynamic speaker. Kefs are far more dynamic than that. So you get into what you like versus what you're willing to live without. What are my final thoughts about the Kef R3 Metas? Well, first of all, I'm glad I spent the money on them. They have expanded the details of music that I'm hearing. This goes back to at one point when I owned the Veri audio fins. It's that kind of information that is being, that music, that detail that's being presented that I haven't heard in a while, that these offer. They also have that interesting Kef shelf, whereas when they start rolling off down at the bottom end, they drop and then they cruise along on this plateau and then drop some more. And that adds an interesting flavor to the music. Gear matching. Well, as you know, I test out with a wide variety of equipment. I do solid state amplification, vacuum tubes, Class D with and without tubes, and the GAN technology of Class D, as well as digital direct. I had a chance to listen to these with the Peachtree Carina GAN 300 integrated amplifier, which does digital direct when you pipe in the digital source directly into their system. And I'm going to say this, that since the R3 Metas are not the richest, chestiest sound, if you're wanting that, that's not a good match. But on the other hand, if you want that clarity, the speed that some people like to call with it, the detail, the crispness, oh yeah, Class D is really a wonder. With the Emerald Physics 600.2 SE power amplifier, that's Class D, but it has 2 vacuum tubes in it. When those are engaged, that's really something special with these speakers. These speakers love the power of it. And keep in mind, if you're going to run these speakers, unless you're using 35 watts per channel of vacuum tube power, you're going to want at least 50. And I would tell you, these really start coming alive at least 75 good solid watts per channel, not AV receiver power. But with the juice from that Emerald Physics amp, wow, what a nice combination. Can't rave about it enough. With 35 watts of integrated tube power per channel, the R3 Metas just love that combination as well. There is the sweetness comes out that you don't get with Class D. There's that little bit of warmth. You're still not getting that chesty sound, but you get a little bit more warmth and color, and that is a fun experience. Amplifier matching, just give yourself the proper amount of power. So in conclusion, am I glad that I bought these? Oh, absolutely. Will they become my primary stand mount speakers? Not sure yet, but I'm going to keep them around and we're going to see how they match up. Like I said, I'd love to get a hold of the Bootcart S400s. Andrew Jones Source Point 8s. I would kill to get my ears on a pair of those to see how they perform, because they also use a concentric driver system. But I can tell you right now, it's going to be hard to beat these for what they offer, because between the dynamics, the imaging, the soundstage, all those factors, along with some that we forget about, which is the fun factor. These are fun to listen to. You can't go wrong with the R3 Metas. If this is the type of speaker you want, just get them on a good pair of stands, but don't bring them out too far in the room. You'll be surprised by how close you can move them back. And when you're in a small space like this, every inch counts. So thanks for watching, everybody. And until next time, take care.